afternoon. I'm Mike Stevens with Metro Bank. I serve as the chair of the Douglas County Chamber of Commerce. I'm proud to be here with you today at the Greystone Power Luncheon. Today we're being sponsored and hosted by the Grace Assisted Living community, and we want to welcome you here today. Before we get started with our program, I want to take a second to say thank you to Jim and Nick's Barbecue. I hope everyone's enjoying your barbecue lunch. Let's give them a round of applause. I told Bill Osborne when he sat down, it's always going to be a good lunch when the cookie is the biggest thing on your plate when you sit down for lunch. So I want to ask Bill if he'll step forward and ask a word of prayer for us and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's stand, if you would, please. Father God in heaven, we come to you today in the name of your Son, Jesus. We thank you, Lord, that we have the right to assemble. We thank you that we live in a land where we have freedoms. Lord, as we stand here today, our minds go back a year ago when our community was in a state of turmoil because of all the heavy flooding, the rains, and the deaths and the injuries that we were being made aware of. We just ask right now that you would just bless all of those who were hit by the flooding and the aftermath of it last year. Especially do we lift up those families who lost loved ones, because we know even as hard as it is to recover from the damage to the houses and property, that it's impossible to recover from having lost those that we loved other than by turning to you for solace. And we just ask that you would just now bless all of those who were impacted by the situation last year. We thank you, Lord, that we can look ahead, though, because we know that there's hope in you, and we do so at this time. We ask that you would just bless each family that's represented here and all of those that call on the name of the Lord. Bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies and us to your service, and may we seek and serve you day by day. In the precious name of Jesus we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bill. We appreciate that so much. We'll go ahead and at this time ask Lonnie Vaughter with Greystone Assisted Living to step forward and tell us a little bit about her company.
Hi, I appreciate you guys all coming out today and giving us the opportunity to sponsor this event. We're always honored to be a part of anything to do with the Chamber. So most of you have heard about us or have driven by on Hospital Drive and seen us and our sign out there. Some of you, Extreme Images, even did our sign. But, but we've been in the community for several years. We are in assisted living. Most of you probably know us as Good Neighbor Care. We were Good Neighbor Care for the past few years. And July 1st, we were purchased by Legacy Senior Services, and we are back to Grace, which is how everybody knew of us for the past several years. Everybody, even our caller ID still said Grace Assisted Living. So we just went back with tradition and went back to Grace. The new company that purchased us is privately owned. They are amazing. We have been amazed at the changes. Those of you who haven't come to the building, please come by and see us. We have recently remodeled, all new floors, paint, furniture, lighting, everything. So it's a completely different place. And we will have an open house starting we're going to have one the third week in October on that Thursday and that Sunday. So if any of you are interested, please let me know. We're going to be mailing things out in the community and having things posted, so you'll have opportunities to come by. But I just appreciate you guys letting us be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I've got an announcement from the president of the Chamber. I'm going to ask Callie to step forward, please.
Good morning, everybody, or I guess good afternoon at this point. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. I am here to ask for your help in hopefully what will be very simple. On each of your tables is a card that looks like this, and in the corner it has highlighted DCC, that's for Douglas County Chamber. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce each year does a political action committee that they call the Business Action Network. And essentially what this is the way that they keep us and our members up to date at the legislature. So as things are going on during the legislative year, they will send updates by email. It's very simple, and you can disconnect at any time. What they've asked the chambers locally to do, who are members of the Georgia Chamber, which we are, is a competition. We each year take our Chairman's Club and some of our board members to the Eggs and Issues Breakfast. It's about a $1,200 table to attend that, and they've given us an opportunity to win that table, which saves us $1,200. So we like that. What they're doing is the chamber who gets the most of these submitted wins the table. So it's a very simple competition, and I thought to myself, how many chamber presidents actually have the guts to stand up in front of their entire membership at the meeting and say, would everyone please fill one of these out so we can win this? So we're trying to submit at least 100 of these. I've got about 120 of you in the room today. If you have not done this, and if you do not mind, it's truly the only personal information you're giving is your email address. And as I said, you can disconnect if it's something you decide later that you don't want. There are 6 at every table. I will have some extras, and I'll come around if you want one. But if you can use the lovely pens that Lonnie and Grace Assisted Living has provided you with, in each of your bags there is a pen to fill these out, and then just leave them in the center of your table. You don't have to mail them. They are postage paid, but we're counting them before we mail them in because we want to know. So if you'll just leave them on your table, we'll take care of it from there, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. Now it's time for us to recognize our Small Business of the Quarter. For those of you that attend regularly, you know we do bring someone up who's sort of gone above and beyond and been recognized by their peers in the community for the community service work they do and for their business. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we determined that, then I'm going to ask the folks that are recipients this quarter to step forward while I talk to you about their business. Nominations for the Small Business of the Quarter are sought from the Chamber Board of Directors, Chamber diplomats, county and city officials, and the school system representatives. Once the applications are received for the nominees, the selection committee reviews the applications and makes decisions based on several attributes, including community service. I would like to ask Carrie and Eric Kierleeper with K9 Technologies to step forward and stand beside me while I tell you a little bit about their business, if they're here with us today. Are they here with us today?
I'll stand in their place.
Okay. Okay. Okay, all right, that's fine. I'll go ahead and read it. That's all right. I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about their business. K9 Technologies installs and services products for residential, small business, healthcare, and commercial low-voltage markets. Their primary focus is platforms including access control, video surveillance, fire alarms, and voice and data systems. They opened their doors in 2003, and the company has a staff of 10 associates that they see doubling in the next 5 years. They've also partnered with local churches to give less fortunate families a great Christmas. They've also donated materials and services to help local teachers and students. And so I tell you what we'll do, we'll save this for them when they are able to join us, but we do want to recognize K9 Technologies as the Small Business of the Quarter. Now I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker for the day. Maureen Kelly with the Atlanta Regional Commission. She is the Business and Community Liaison for the Atlanta Regional Commission, which is the area agency on aging for the 10-county metropolitan Atlanta region. She holds a BSW from Georgia State University and an MSW from the University of Georgia. Ms. Kelly is responsible for a number of programs, including employment and retirement, public policy and advocacy, and public-private partnership development. She serves on both the Atlanta Regional Workforce Board and the Fulton County Workforce Board. She's the immediate past president of the Georgia Older Worker Network and past president of the Georgia Gerontology Society. She's also the founder and president of Thanks Mom and Dad Fund, a foundation created to support programs and services for older adults. Maureen and her husband live in Lawrenceville, and they have 4 grown children and 6.8 grandchildren, and I'm going to let her explain what that means. Please welcome Maureen Kelly.
I guess I was excited about going out of town to, in the very near future, at the time I wrote that bio, although we did not yet have the arrival of our newest granddaughter, who has since arrived, and so that makes 7 grandchildren. Thank you. Kind of corny. I apologize to those of you who are putting the program together. I want to talk to you a little bit today, a little bit about demographics, but I really would like to get you to maybe bump up your thinking to a slightly different level. I think there's a few of us in the room who are leading edge boomers, some of us with unrecognizably gray hair, or some others not. But as a leading edge baby boomer, I think I've had the opportunity to see some of this from the inside out. And I did want to mention that at the Atlanta Regional Commission, I know you hear so many great things about our water and air quality and transportation planning divisions, but few people even realize that we are the Area Agency on Aging, and it is the largest division within ARC. And we work very closely with our local counties. Douglas County has been a great supporter in assuming the aging program, and we've seen a lot of great things happening here. Are we going to grow older and grow smarter? And that's what we're thinking. You know, it was probably 35 years ago that we heard that adage about, it was an ad, I believe, for hair color, and it said, we're not getting older, we're getting better. And the best part about it is that over time, we've been able to add more birthdays, many, many more birthdays, some celebrated, some not so celebrated, but it is a whole lot better than the alternative. And it, however, creates a whole different need to plan differently in all of our programs. We do know that in 2000, that 1 in 10 people were over the age of 60, and yet at the same time, we look ahead to 2030 where it'll be 1 in 5. What that really means is that it's no longer a special population. It really is a gray society. It is part and parcel of the fabric of who we are, young and old, all in there together. 1 in 5 is a pretty critical thing. And if you think about it in terms of population, it's actually our older adult population by that year will be equal to South Dakota and Wyoming combined. So we already know that we will have the same ratio as Miami, Fort Lauderdale. And we know that how we've thought of Florida in the past. If you look at the region's growth, a 55 population from 2005 to 2030 certainly has grown by 127%. But in Douglas, if you didn't notice it on the previous slide, take a look. You've actually done twice as much as that, and that projections are getting closer every day. 2030 used to be a number way out there, but we have moved into the decade where most of that growth has begun, and we are really looking ahead to communities that how do we change in our communities enough to meet this change, which is coming at incredible speed. If you look at the demographics themselves, this is something that you've been told over and over again. I don't think this is necessarily new news. Certainly the 65 and over, beginning over this last decade and then moving up to 2040 and 2050 and beyond, has grown quite dramatically just since 2000. Likewise, the 85 plus, better living through chemicals and health care, et cetera, et cetera. But I really want to shift your attention to the next slide, which says something a little bit more dramatically. The good news is we are all living longer. We are adding more candles to that birthday cake. We are having the opportunity to do 2 and 3 careers, pursue avocations as an encore performance later in our retirement years, et cetera, et cetera. But this is not new news. If you look at where that starts to jump up, it really began about 30 years ago. And that is the problem if we haven't taken advantage of using the gift of this longevity and planning for it appropriately. If you take that gift, what can we do to really improve our lives? Well, what everybody does when they think of aging. It's never going to happen, right? We may have squandered this gift by not planning before today, but it's never too late. But we do have to come to some sense of reality about what we're dealing with and how we're dealing with it. what we've done in the past, without taking a look at it through the appropriate lens, was that our growth trends in the 80s, 90s, and 2000 really were all about low-density sprawl that dominated the entire metro landscape. And we built bigger and better houses with better and better features, with larger and larger furniture, without maybe taking a look at how those designs were going to meet our needs of the future. And even when it came to our roads, a vast majority of funds were used to support roads and bridges and car-related infrastructures. And I bring up car-related because overall, the greatest impact of single occupancy vehicles is, coupled with your air quality, is also the whole idea that with more and more people in cars, I want you to think about the juxtaposition for that person who suddenly has some intermittent health problem that may not be able to drive any longer, or that you may have to approach to take away the keys altogether. How in the world, if you look back at that neighborhood, how do they get out of that cul-de-sac across the street for a loaf of bread, or even find the appropriate way to walk within their communities to get any physical exercise or get to a destination? Many neighborhoods don't have sidewalks at all, and a lot of times when they are available, they don't necessarily lead to the right places or to a destination, and that chills the opportunity for people to remain active and active, healthy lifestyles. Walking should be a key, and people should not be forced out into the streets, and yet many of our streetscapes demand that that's where they go. I know a woman in Gwinnett County who showed up at the senior speak out every year for about 4 years. She said, I live in that senior high-rise, and across the street is my church and my grocery store. Could you put a traffic light in, please, so I can get across the street? Sounded like something simple, but it didn't really make it onto the planning priorities for a couple of years. When it did, that street had become, I think, 6 lanes across. Well, now she has her traffic light, but she's kind of target practice and trying to really get across the street. And so I don't know what was better, whether it was the 2-lane with no light and taking her chances, or the way it is now. I bring that up because they seem like simple things, but simple adjustments can actually help us plan for healthier communities and communities where everyone can age and live healthy lives and age in place. As far as, it reminded me of that person in Gwinnett County. I couldn't help but have that in there. But that kind of says it all. I mean, if our street lights and our signage isn't adequate enough to provide a safe environment. And I want you to think here, too, it isn't really just about them or the woman who was in the senior high-rise. It's equally important to the mom with the baby carriage and groceries, et cetera, et cetera. It's really a look at how we're treating all of our citizens. If you look at the health statistics in Georgia, then we know that there is a lot that can be done in terms of health for our residents. First of all, we're 49th in the fact that people do not participate in physical activity, with maybe only 40% of our population doing so. People are not accessing immunizations and all of those things, but a lot of this goes back to activity and engagement and the ability to access services. And yet, you can see the same in Douglas, that about 43% of you did get your flu shots, a little less than that for pneumonia vaccinations. These are things that are often covered by Medicare, and so why aren't people availing themselves of it? A lot of work has been done to bring together partnerships and bring people into places or meet them where they are. Vote and Vax was a very popular program over the last couple of years, where actually at the polling precincts they had health departments trying to bring these deliverables in terms of it's covered, it's good for your health, it's a screening or an immunization that will help you stay active and healthy and vital. And yet, it's always somebody else. And when we look in the mirror, are we being realistic? I mean, and they say that old is always 15 years older than you. And I see evidence of that every day. On our advisory committee, we actually have 85, 89-year-olds volunteer, come in, very actively involved, very much engaged in the process, and they leave there telling me so often, well, I have to leave now to go. We're going to help the elderly today. Now, that really should say it all. It's always somebody else, and reality isn't always our best feature. Not only is it shown in this picture, but even when you think of sexiness, I want you to take a look at what boomers and 65-plus population thinks about their sexiness. And by the way, the drug companies have caught on as well. Now, having said all of that, when it comes to boomers, they're not, what was that old Chevrolet commercial? This is not your mother's or father's Chevrolet, I think. Well, guess what? You've relied on the Area Agency on Aging for years and years and years to make sure through your local county-based aging programs that things are in place. This whole network of services for older adults. Meals on Wheels, senior centers, but you know, it is not the same senior center today. Most of them are moving towards wellness centers. For any of you in my age group, could you think about going to the senior centers just to play bingo? But could you consider going to a wellness center to remain active, get your physical exercise, meet up with your friends, perhaps do some other things that might lead you to opportunities out in the community for other engagement? We have moved, and the boomers we've seen since grade school, college, and now entering retirement, like to do things their way, like to do things differently, and like to dictate what that is. They have very different tastes. They are not your father's Chevrolet. They are not the same consumer base that we've been treating. And yet, as rapidly as things are changing, oh my God, what were we thinking back in the 80s? You know, women, I think I had a hairdo like that. I hate to admit it. But they're changing anyway, regardless of what we recognize, regardless of what we're dealing with. It's happening. And every day that goes by, it clicks away. So I want to say, there will always be this network of support services there, particularly knowing that life can change in an instant for anybody. So we need the support services. Those things have to be in place. But we need to elevate our thinking to a higher level and make sure that we're doing the right kind of planning for this whole demographic shift in terms of our entire community. And how does that translate? Well, we need to be looking at how we're promoting housing and transportation options, encouraging more healthy lifestyles, and expanding information and access to services. And, you know, when you talk about the many ways that we try to look into the future and guess what will happen, we know that the scale of change must be in line with the scale of the demographic shift. To do this, we have to look beyond that service delivery system and say, what is needed in here in Douglas County? How can we make these things happen? You can't meet the needs of all of your older adult population, but instead you can maximize what individuals can do for themselves, perhaps, by putting into place more things that would be self-directed and create an environment. But the fact of the matter is we have to do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. A couple of years ago, we convened a charrette and came up with at the end of the day, the things that we thought at ARC, in cooperation with our counties, in cooperation with consumers throughout the region, what would make for healthier communities that would promote housing and transportation options. And when I say transportation, I encourage you not to just think of the traditional definition of transportation where it was about building roads and bridges, but instead transportation and mobility. How are people getting around, and how does that lend to a healthier community? And then, of course, expanding information and access to other services like your health services and linkages to all the resources that might be necessary. And at the end of the day, we said we really have to reimagine the way we all live together. When we convened the charrette, it was a huge effort with a number of community partners, and I'll just flip through these pretty quickly, and ended up with 6 projects throughout the region, and some of you, I'm sure, were involved with that charrette process. And it gave us ideas on visioning how people of all abilities could live in a community that we build for people of all ages. And how does that happen? Well, it was because of Andre Giovanni's leadership in coming to this charrette that we hosted that we came up with the framework at the end of the day. And the key lessons that we learned were that lifelong communities do require good planning and forethought, and that accessibility must be comprehensive and valued community-wide. The core principles, and I left a handout on your tables and outside the room as well, are included in connectivity. Will people be able to access transit or pedestrian sidewalks that are safe? Will they be able to interact with each other in the community? And when you talk about transportation, if that isn't one of the most overlooked areas, in the past, we used to give people a ride to the senior center, maybe to the doctors or their health care. But once we take those keys away, who helps them get to visit a friend? Who helps them socially interact? Which we know and have proven that social interaction is a key in keeping people healthier longer. We need diverse dwelling types and housing options that will actually make it possible for people to age in place. And of course, that needs to be affordable. As far as the consideration for our existing residents, we know that there are many codes and regulations and things that everybody first says, I don't know if we can do that here or there or yon. But my feeling is, guys, we're the big people now. We can make those decisions or change those rules or change those regulations. I'm going to move along pretty quickly here. There is another generation coming behind us. You see the little Y, right? And I bring them into the conversation because our households are also changing. And while we're seeing a dramatic increase in the number of school-age children, we're not seeing as much growth within households with children. In fact, it's dropping. And if you see here, without children, the growth rate is 87%. And so everything looks a little bit different. But there's hope in that too, because I wanted to point out that generation specifically because you can see they're pretty much a mirror reflection of ours in that they're the echo boomers. So, we're going to have a lot of older adults coming through the pipeline, and you go, well, why would you do that? It's just for like 10 years and then they'll all die off, right? So, well, because remember, it's good for everybody, and because we have yet another generation coming right behind that'll do the same thing. I know. I have 4 kids, remember? So, I want to bring this up to those of you who are employers and represent companies, because there is a correlation as well in the workplace. And if you know, right now, we do know that the 55 workforce is growing, and yet the growth of the population right behind us, those entering the workforce now, is that growth of that population is essentially flat. I think that might have been a slip of the tongue, no pun intended there. But it's growing at about 0.5%. And so everything around the workplace is changing as well as we've moved to technology and different skill sets. But at the end of the day, we have to still remember remember that aging is also a diversity factor along with gender, race, and ethnicity. You now are faced with 4 generations in your workplace, and this really amounts to more than succession planning. You really have to put some effort into looking in your own houses and saying, how will we accommodate that knowledge transfer? How will we harness the experience and skill set of the older adults? And how will we encourage them to work with us in perhaps phased retirement, different flexible opportunities, and create some change? I noticed that the sponsors here today, some of you are actually companies who we herald as having best practices. It's going to vary industry by industry, but you think about the energy field, and I noticed Greystone and Georgia Power. Well, Georgia Power has already how am I doing on time? I need about 5 more minutes. Will that work? Okay. Georgia Power has already begun to form a retiree reservist pool. Why? They have journeymen that they've invested a lot of money in training, but they're not going to have them climbing poles when they're 65 years old. And they take their retirement walk out the door, but then there's this gap over here. Well, how nice it is that they have this reservist pool that they can bring back in for a project, for mentoring, for training, on a very limited basis. The retiree's thrilled. They don't really want to work every day at the intensity level that they did before. And it's been so successful that they've actually had VPs and other level staff enter that reservist pool. And by the way, just so you don't get scared, they come back in at the pay, not at the VP pay, but at the pay that's being offered to the reservist pool. So you're not going to have to shell out a lot of more money just to capture their expertise. IBM has done a lot of work with transition teaching because they know that their staff have math and science skills, and that they can easily translate into other teaching positions and use those skills. And IBM knows that they improve the community along the way, so they actually promote that type of transition into teaching. Pfizer, and I'm giving you these examples because whether you're a small business or a large business, there are ways, if you take a step back and examine your environment, to do what you might need to do to sustain yourselves, whether it's because you're faced with a lot of retirees or whether it's because you've had to downsize. You want to sustain your business so that it's in the best position for the rebound. Pfizer takes their retirees and asks them to cover all those conferences with exhibit halls, and that way they don't have to take their sales reps out of the field during conference time. And so some of these things are really no-brainers that can really help extend your labor force, can help you through some tough times, and really give you an opportunity to use the experience and skill set of those mature workers and those seasoned employees that you've invested so much in. It also keeps them engaged, even on a very part-time basis, and we know that people who remain engaged not only want to remain engaged, but it also helps to keep them healthier longer. So I see that as equally important to both the small business and the large business, and actually put another framework around this to help keep these conversations going. We're going to be making a presentation at SHRM Atlanta next month, a whole track on this. So more and more businesses are coming around to this type of thinking, and for those of you who would like to join the conversation, we have a monthly meeting. You don't have to travel to ARC. We make a phone conference line available, and continue to look at these emerging issues around the workplace. I want to just for a second go way back to the beginning when we talked about services, just to remind you, because I would be a terrible representative of the Area Agency on Aging if I didn't say, if you don't already know Richard Hagan, who heads up your Douglas Senior Services, get to know him. There's lots of ways that business and aging can cooperate and do great things through partnership. It's all about partnerships these days to extend all of our dollars. And every year we acknowledge and give out Business and Aging Awards. If you don't already have it, I want you to take the number of AgeWise Connection. It's 404-463-3333. And Douglas Senior Services is 770-489-3100. I'm going to give you that today as one of my greatest tips to you, because we know that employers are losing about $11 million a year on lost productivity for those of your staff who are having to provide caregiving to mom or dad or across the country to a relative that needs it. And so call upon and get to know your local aging, county-based aging program, and certainly pass on that information to your staff when they need it. That's where they can call. Narrow our goals and look for the one that you really want before you take a bite out of everything else, and work together to make that happen. Not especially fond of this, but I think it points out that we don't quit playing because we grow old. We grow old when we quit playing. So embrace the evolution that's occurring around you. And make sure that you harness it. Make sure that you're there at the table with the right partners to make sure that the right things are in place, because we know it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the one that's most adaptable to change. This is a sign that we saw in England for elderly people. I think the boomers kind of think of themselves more like this. Instead of the person and Whistler's mother in that picture, I think we all think of ourselves as Tina Turners as far as rockers go. And I know that working together, we can build the kind of communities where all people like to live, people of all ages, can realize all of their dreams for the future. Are there any questions? I hope that gives you food for thought. I wish you all a good day.
Maureen, thank you so much for coming and spending your time with us. This is such an important topic. We as business leaders need to think about how this impacts us, and what I realized was I'm going to be one of those 1 in 5 that'll be over 60 in 2030. Thank you so much for reminding me of that fact and making it very clear. My parents celebrate 50 years of marriage this weekend, and we're going up to celebrate with them, but we're also talking about those living in place and care needs that they have. So it's something that if you don't face now for yourself, you'll face soon. So it's good to know resources available. So thank you so much. I'd like to ask Lonnie Vodder to come back up, and we're going to do some door prizes, Lonnie. Let's have the bowl on that side and let her draw. All right. All right, if you don't have your ticket out, go ahead and get it out. We're going to do some door prizes. We've got a chair here first, a collapsible chair. Just call the numbers out there.
618634.
634. All right. The next is a $25 gift certificate to Jim and Nick's, and this is provided by the restaurant.
Okay, it's 640.
640. Last 3 digits. 640.
640.
Oh, right here. Put your hand to it. All right, now we've got 2 more Jim and Nick's, and these are provided by Grace Assisted Living, so thank you very much.
633.
633. All right.
Bring it back over.
All right. One more. We got one more $25 Jim and Nick's.
627.
627. All right, this side of the room. All right. All right. Just a few quick announcements here before we go. We want to say thank you to the City of Douglasville for the use of the Conference Center, Jim and Nick's Barbecue, Grace Assisted Living, Maureen Kelly. Oh, and don't forget the cards. Thank you. Sorry, looking back. Don't forget your cards. If you have not turned those in, just leave them on the table, okay? All right. Thank you so much.
Sample ballots are available out.
Sample ballots available for voting. All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.